The alarm chirps. It's a sound that should be a signal for a new beginning, a fresh start, a clean slate. But for Mike, it's the first battle lost in a war he didn't even realize he was fighting. He reaches out, his thin arm trembling slightly, and his fingers find the familiar cold glass of the phone. With one flick of the wrist, Mike snoozes. In that split second, he trades his future for 9 minutes of low-quality, shallow unconsciousness. For 3 years, Mike lived in a state of quiet desperation. He wondered why his business was stagnant, why his health was drifting into the gray zone of fine, and why his bank account looked like a flat line on a hospital monitor. He thought he needed a big break. He convinced himself that he just needed $1 million idea, a sudden surge of hustle, or a stroke of luck from the universe. He was wrong. The biological reality is that Mike wasn't failing at the big things. He was failing at the first 12 minutes of his day. Your brain and Mike's brain is a survival machine, not a success machine. It doesn't recognize a 1% decline as a threat. When Mike snoozes that alarm or skips that one uncomfortable email, his brain treats it as background noise. It thinks he's just staying comfortable, staying safe, staying alive. But neural imaging confirms that your future self treats those 12 minutes as a death sentence for your potential. Mike feels stuck. He feels like he's running on a treadmill that someone else is controlling, and the speed is slowly, imperceptibly increasing. He looks at people who seem to have it all, and he assumes they are biologically different. But the truth is much more uncomfortable to hear. They aren't running faster than Mike. They just made a 1% pivot 3 years ago, while Mike stayed on the straight line. Or worse, Mike pivoted 1% the other way, toward the ground. Every day Mike stays in this loop, he isn't just staying still, he is paying a potential tax. The cost of inaction is not zero, it's the total sum of the person Mike was supposed to become, dissolving into the ether of maybe tomorrow.
To understand why 12 minutes can ruin Mike's life, we have to look at his ancestors. The data is undeniable. Mike's brain is still operating on Stone Age firmware. In the Pleistocene era, growth was a luxury and a dangerous one at that. If Mike's ancestors wandered too far from the tribe to self-actualize or take risks, they got eaten by a saber-toothed cat. Mike's brain evolved to prioritize familiar misery over unknown happiness. Familiar misery is a biological safe haven. His brain knows that even if he's unhappy, he is currently alive. Therefore, his neural pathways are wired to protect the status quo at all costs. That tightening in your chest, that heavy fog, that sense of not today, that isn't laziness. It is an ancient survival mechanism, trying to keep Mike inside the cave, where it's safe. But in the modern world, in 2026, this bias is an absolute catastrophe. Mike no longer has to worry about predators, but he has to worry about digital algorithms specifically designed to exploit this craving for safety. His brain thinks that scrolling for 12 minutes is a safe way to conserve energy. It doesn't realize that today, the cave is now a prison. Think about how this feels. Mike has a goal. He wants to fix his finances or start that project, but as soon as he sits down, a wave of "not now" washes over him like a cold tide. This is the evolutionary disconnect. Mike's brain is trying to save him from a threat that does not exist. It treats deep work like a physical predator. It would rather Mike stay safe in the mediocre middle than risk the danger of standing out. His conscious mind, the 5% that wants to succeed, is reaching for the sun. But his subconscious, the 95% that actually controls his movement, is terrified of the heat. It chooses the shade every single time. Standing still is the same as falling behind. Mike's brain thinks it's helping him survive the day. It doesn't realize it's helping him ruin his decade. It's not Mike's fault he's wired this way, but it is his responsibility to recalibrate.
Meet Mike's internal enemy. I call it the small mercy monster. This isn't a loud, aggressive voice that yells at Mike. It's not the voice that tells him you're a failure or you're worthless. That voice is actually quite easy to ignore because it's so extreme. No, the small mercy monster is much more dangerous because it sounds like Mike's best friend. It whispers things that sound reasonable. It's only $5, Mike. You can start the budget tomorrow. Or, it's just one day of skipping the gym. You need the rest. You don't want to burn out. It uses kindness to kill Mike's potential. It grants him micro-mercies that feel good in the immediate moment, but act as a slow-acting poison for his long-term identity. Mike thinks he's making a choice. He thinks, I am deciding to take it easy. But the biological reality is that Mike isn't choosing anything. His neurons are simply following the path of least resistance. Every time Mike listens to the small mercy monster, he is strengthening a neural groove in his brain. Think about Mike's daily life. How many of these mercies does he grant himself? The just 5 more minutes on social media. The I'll do it after lunch procrastination that inevitably leads to I'll do it tomorrow. These aren't isolated events. They are the components of a system designed to keep Mike exactly where he is. It feels like a subtle, low-grade guilt that never quite goes away, like a background hum on a radio that he can't turn off. The monster has convinced him that today isn't the perfect day to start. It tells him that there will be a magical Tuesday in the future where he will wake up with infinite energy. But Mike is starting to realize Tuesday is a myth. It's a carrot on a stick used to keep him walking in the circle. Eventually, this guilt turns into dopamine fatigue. Mike has spent so much time taking the easy path that his brain's reward system is fried. This is the loop. The more he snoozes, the more tired he feels. The more he procrastinates, the more overwhelmed he becomes. It is a self-reinforcing downward spiral that starts with just 12 minutes of weakness and ends with a life that feels like a shadow of what it could have been. To truly understand the gravity of Mike's situation, he needs to meet the compound ghost. This is the version of Mike that decided to walk exactly 1 degree off course 3 years ago. For the first 10 steps, Mike and the ghost are practically touching. If someone saw them, they wouldn't see any difference. They have the same goals. They talk the same way. This is the danger zone. In the beginning, the results of the 1% pivot are completely invisible. Mike eats the salad, he feels the same. Mike eats the burger, he feels the same. But neural friction is cumulative. As they keep walking, the mathematics of the universe begin to take over. After 100 steps, Mike can see the ghost is a few feet away. He might notice the ghost looks a little more tired. His backpack looks slightly heavier. But by step 1000, they are in 2 completely different zip codes. The ghost is now haunted by the decisions of his past. He is living in a dopamine sluice, a state where his brain is so conditioned to seek the easy path that he can no longer even see the original path Mike is on. The ghost isn't just behind Mike, he is in a different reality. He looks at Mike and thinks Mike got lucky, not realizing they started at the exact same point. This is the 12-minute divergence. Those 12 minutes Mike spends snoozing, that is the 1 degree shift. You don't feel it today. You won't even feel it next week. But in 5 years, that shift is the difference between Mike being the CEO of his own life or a passenger in a car
headed toward a cliff. Think about the neural friction of Mike's current habits. He's lubricated the path to mediocrity. To change his life, Mike doesn't need a 180-degree turn. He just needs to reclaim that 1 degree. When Mike wins those first 12 minutes, he is telling his brain that the small mercy monster is no longer the captain. He is building a skyscraper, 1% brick at a time. It looks small, it looks insignificant, but the mathematics of compounding are the closest thing we have to real magic. If Mike improves by 1% every day, he is 37 times better by the end of the year. If he declines by 1%, he nears 0. The math is cold, and it doesn't care about Mike's excuses. History is littered with the bodies of the 1-degree failures. Let's look at a shadow study of 2 potential lives, Mike A and Mike B. They have the same talent, the same IQ, and the same opportunities. Mike A decides to optimize what psychologists call the transitions. He realizes that the time between activities, those 12-minute gaps, is where most people lose their focus. When Mike A finishes a task, instead of checking his phone, he sits in silence for 2 minutes to reset his neural focus. He wins the transition. Mike B, however, falls victim to micro-leaking. Every time he finishes a task, he rewards himself with just a quick look at his notifications. That 12-minute leak triggers a dopamine spike, followed by a refractory period. Mike B thinks he's taking a break, but he's actually resetting his focus clock to 0. By the end of the day, Mike A has completed 20% more deep work than Mike B. Not because he worked harder, but because he avoided the neural tax of the transitions. Multiply that 20% difference by a decade. Each pebble in that backpack Mike B is wearing represents a 1% mistake. A snoozed alarm in 2023, a missed workout in 2024, a just this once unhealthy meal in 2025. Individually, a pebble weighs nothing. Mike B can carry 1 pebble with no effort, but after 10 years, Mike B is carrying 10 tons of regret. He isn't lazy, he's just crushed by the accumulated weight of his own micro-decisions. The tragedy of Mike B is that he never felt himself failing. Failing didn't feel like a crash, it felt like a slow, comfortable drift. He thought being 1 degree off course didn't matter because he was still close enough. But in the game of life, close enough is the most expensive place to be. Mike A isn't a superhero, he just understood the mathematics of small mistakes. While Mike B was fighting against the gravity of his own habits, Mike A was being carried forward by the momentum of his. Mike A didn't climb the mountain, he built it under his feet while he was walking.
Now, Mike, we have to talk about something uncomfortable. We have to talk about your ego. The biological reality is that Mike's ego actually prefers the problem over the solution. Why? Because as long as Mike has a problem, as long as he's the victim of bad habits or bad luck, he doesn't have to be responsible for his results. If Mike admits that 12 minutes a day is what's ruining his life, he has to admit that he is the one holding the shovel. He has to admit that the person he is today is the direct result of the person he chose to be yesterday. That is a painful, ego-shattering realization. Most people watching this, and Mike himself, will agree with everything I'm saying. They will feel that spark of aha, and they will think, yes, tomorrow is the day I change everything. But the data is cold. 99% of you will forget this by tomorrow morning. Mike's ego will find a way to make him an exception to the rule. It will tell him that his life is too complicated, too stressful, or too unique for 1% pivots to work. Mike's ego loves the big change fantasy. It loves the idea of a total life overhaul. Why? Because big changes are inherently unsustainable. Mike's ego knows he will quit in 3 days, and then the ego can go back to being comfortably miserable.
What the ego hates is the 1% pivot, because the 1% pivot is doable. The ego knows that if Mike actually fixes those 12 minutes, Mike will change. And change, even good change, is a threat to the identity the ego has spent years building. Is Mike more attached to his excuses or his potential? Most people are in love with their sad story. They use it as a shield to protect themselves from the effort of trying. They would rather be right about how hard life is than be successful at making it better. If Mike wants to be in the 1%, he has to stop acting like the 99. He has to stop tolerating the small mercies. He has to look at those 12 minutes, the snooze button, the mindless scroll, the hesitation, and see them for what they really are, the bricks of his own prison. The only person keeping him in the trench is the person he sees in the mirror. Now, Mike, take a breath. The tension you're feeling in your chest right now, the urge to turn off this video or check your phone, that is cognitive dissonance. It's the sound of Mike's old brain fighting his new realization. It's actually a very good sign. It means the ghost is losing its grip. It means the monster is scared. The biological reality is that Mike is not his habits. Mike is the observer of his habits. Now that he can name the small mercy monster, it no longer has absolute power over him. He has exposed its trick. He has realized that the monster isn't his friend, it's his anchor. Mike doesn't need to overhaul his entire life today. That's just the big change trap talking again. Instead, I want Mike to focus on the neuro pivot. Mike is the architect of his own neural pathways. Every time he makes a conscious choice, even a tiny 1% choice, he is voting for the person he wants to become. He is casting a ballot for the Mike who succeeds. When Mike wins those first 12 minutes of the day, he isn't just getting a head start. He is performing a dopamine reset. He is teaching his brain that rewards come after effort, not before it. This one shift ripples through the rest of Mike's day. It changes how he talks to his family, how he handles stress, and how he views his own future. He begins to see himself as a person who keeps promises to himself. Mike has spent years building the downward pivot. It will take time to build the upward pivot, but the math is on Mike's side. Because of compounding, the work gets easier as he goes. Once the upward pivot gains momentum, it becomes Mike's new path of least resistance. Eventually, success will become just as habitual and easy for Mike as failure used to be. The gravity will start pulling him up instead of down. To reclaim his life, Mike needs a tactical blueprint. Not a vibe, but a repeatable system. Here are 3 quantifiable steps Mike can execute to start his 1% pivot tonight. Step 1. The 10-second gap. Whenever Mike feels the urge to snooze or scroll, he must give himself a 10-second gap. He shouldn't try to fight the urge with willpower. Instead, he should just observe it. He should say to himself, "The monster is asking for a mercy." That simple act of naming the urge moves the activity from his emotional amygdala to his logical prefrontal cortex. In those 10 seconds, the ghost loses its power, and Mike regains the wheel. Step 2. The 12-minute win. Mike must pick one dead zone in his day. This time is now sacred space. No phone, no distractions, no inputs. Mike must use these 12 minutes to do the one thing his future self would thank him for. Read 5 pages, write down 3 priorities, do 1 set of push-ups. If Mike wins the transition, he wins the day. Step 3. Friction mapping. Mike needs to look at his environment. Where is the small mercy monster hiding? If Mike's phone is the first thing he touches in the morning, he must move it to another room.
Mike's environment is the gravity of his life. If he wants to fly, he has to stop surrounding himself with weights that pull him down. These steps are small. They are almost insultingly simple. But if Mike does them, he is no longer person B. He has officially pivoted 1 degree up. He is now on a different trajectory than 99% of the world. He is building momentum that will eventually become unstoppable. Now, Mike, I have a question for you, and I want you to answer it honestly. If you stayed exactly as you are right now, no better, no worse, for the next 10 years, would you be a hero or a cautionary tale?
We like to think that Mike's life will be defined by the big moments, the graduations, the weddings, the big promotions. But those are just the trophies. The game of life is actually played in the 12 minutes when no one is watching. It's played in the silence of the morning and the exhaustion of the evening. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. The person Mike wants to be is already inside him. That person is just buried under a mountain of small mercies and 1% mistakes. Every time Mike chooses the pivot, he is digging that person out of the mud. He is building a legacy that isn't made of gold, but of consistency. He is becoming the architect of his own destiny. Mike's time is the only asset he can never earn back. He shouldn't let the small mercy monster rob him of it one snooze at a time. The 1% math is undeniable. Mike can either be ruined by it, or he can be saved by it. The choice is made in the next 12 minutes. But what if the small mercy monster isn't the only force living in Mike's mind? What if there is a silent force that has been observing him his entire life, waiting for him to notice it? A force that doesn't care about habits or math, but about something much deeper and more mysterious. We'll explore that silent force in the next video. Until then, Mike, keep the pivot.